Being immune, you are prepared to encounter things that could cause damage. You are ready to respond with strength. You have built up resistance. As Christians, we will face struggles in this world, but we are building up immunity by the power of the Holy Spirit from the devastation that sickness of mind, body, and spirit can cause. Loneliness, anxiety, trauma, addictions, hatred, pain. We are not promised an easy life, but we are promised that God will see us through it all.
Let's try that again. There we are. Good morning. Good to see you guys today. My name is Ethan Luhman, one of the pastors here at Peace, and we are kicking off a brand new series here called Immune. And part of what's behind this is, what it means to be immune is not to. It doesn't mean that you never encounter the illness. Actually, to gain immunity, you have to experience the illness first. You get a little bit of what's going on, and that helps build up the strength that your body has. So it is with our spiritual lives. God doesn't promise that everything's going to be great for us all the time, but God does promise that He'll see us through it all. And that as we go through the difficulties this world has for us, we're going to get stronger. We're going to be able to handle the things that this world throws our way. So today, the first thing we're going to tackle is hate. Hate. I hate fill in the blank. Let's go. No, I'm just kidding. Don't fill in the blank. Unless you're going to say the Dodgers. Yeah, we should all hate the Dodgers. Yeah, big market teams. It's just not fair to us. Little people here. No. Yeah, we can say we hate different foods, different sports teams, all in good fun. But in reality, hatred has worked its way into our society at a pretty massive level. And the thing about hate is it's actually a helpful tool. It's a helpful tool for us. And it becomes helpful politically, it becomes helpful in our families, it becomes helpful maybe in our workplace. It's a dangerous tool, but it's helpful because it makes us immune. I'm going to highlight a few things. If you have a sermon outline in your bulletin, you'll find the outline there. But the first thing that hate does is it makes us immune to our own faults and our own failures. We're going to be looking at a guy in the scriptures named Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. His story takes up about 12, 13 chapters of the Bible. It's a profound life that he lives, and I encourage you to go back and revisit that this week. But Joseph, he's born into the family, the patriarchy, if you will, from Abraham to Isaac, and then Jacob, and then Jacob's son. He has 12 sons. One of them is Joseph, the second to last, the son of his favorite wife. But we begin in Genesis 37, verses 1 and 2, and it says this. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Well, so the first thing that we hear in Genesis 37 is that Jacob is living in the land of his father's sojournings. Now, that's a word I've never used. Sojournings? Actually, Microsoft Word doesn't even recognize it as a legitimate word. That's how uncommon it is. But what the word sojournings mean is basically God called Abraham from a different land to live in the land of Canaan, and he said, I promise I'm going to give this land to your kids. It's just going to take like 400 or 500 years. But go live there in the land of the sojournings. So you're going to have to dwell in a tent. You're going to have to wander around, but it will be yours someday. So basically, the land of his father's sojournings means that Jacob and Joseph and all of their family is stuck between the promise and the fulfillment. They're kind of living with impermanence but also having divine certainty. And I think that's a helpful place for us to start this series, because we are as well aliens in our own promised land, if you will. We've got this promise from God. We're going to have resurrection life, but we still have to go through suffering and death. You got to live with this impermanence alongside this divine certainty. And in the midst of that, well, problems can arise, pains can arise. And what goes on here is that that the Bible highlights this guy named Joseph. Joseph, the 11th son of 12, for his father Jacob. We are let in that he's 17 years old. Any 17-year-olds in the room? We love 17-year-olds, don't we? 17-year-olds are great. And some 17-year-olds are especially great. But even sometimes, I was 17 once. If you're over 17, you were 17 once too. Maybe you can remember what that's like. There's like a passion and a vigor that's maybe unchecked by the experience that comes with getting a little bit older. Well, Joseph it doesn't say in the scriptures that Joseph was pretentious or arrogant or anything like that, but what we hear he is he's somebody who's willing to speak the hard reality. Joseph is willing to speak the hard reality. It says here that he brought a bad report of his brothers to his father. Now, we don't know exactly what that bad report was, but it could have been a couple of things. It could have been like Joseph was tattling on his brothers for doing some bad things. And they did plenty of bad things if you read a couple chapters earlier. It could have been like, Dad, my brothers, you'll never believe what they're doing. But more likely, Joseph began to hear about his brothers around town. The bad report was kind of like a bad reputation. Like, Dad, our family name is starting to get trashed. You won't believe what people are saying about our family. You won't believe what they're saying about your sons. It's not good. We don't have a good reputation out there, Dad. Joseph was willing to speak the hard reality. And his brothers, we can be sure, didn't like that, bringing to light all the issues that were going on. And so their hearts started to turn against Joseph. In systems theory, Joseph became the squeaky wheel. Joseph became the problem, not the problem, but the one who presents the underlying issue of the family dynamic. But instead of seeing the broader issue, Joseph's brothers, well, they just start to hate him for bringing it up. How could you say that about me? We do this too, don't we? I can't believe you'd go there. Why would you bring up that about my past? How could you judge me like that? See, hate becomes a powerful tool to avoid our own faults and failures. Instead of actually sitting with the weight of our actions, instead of analyzing whether we are in fact right or wrong, hate makes us immune to that. We're able to just brush it off and say, no, they're a terrible person for even going there. We've all used this tool, haven't we? Maybe some of us have had this tool used on us. And it goes all the way back to the very first siblings. In Genesis chapter 4, Cain and Abel, like they both present a sacrifice to God, and God actually liked Abel's but not Cain's because maybe Cain didn't give it very much thought. We don't fully know, but we do know that Cain gets angry. And God says to him, why are you angry? Why is your face fallen? Hey, if you do well, it's going to be good. But if you don't do well, guess what? Sin is crouching at your door, and its desire is to take you out. You must rule over it. Well, we know what Cain does. Instead of analyzing his own heart, he kills his brother. Hate makes us immune to our own faults and failures. How is hate covering up our need to deal with our own sin? There's another way that hate becomes a tool to make us immune. It makes us immune to our own hurt. Hate makes us immune to our own hurt. The story goes on in Genesis 37. We don't know how much longer this is, but what we hear is that, this is what we hear. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the son of his old age and of his favorite wife. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now, Jacob was kind of a messed up guy. I mean, he was a little deceitful from the very beginning. Jacob actually means deceiver. And not deceiver, it means something along those lines. I shouldn't have even said that because now I don't remember. You'll look that up on your phone, and you'll let me know after the service because that's how life works these days. But he was a trickster. I mean something like trickster, I think. And he deceived his brother out of the inheritance. He went and worked 7 years for one wife, and then he got tricked by his father-in-law into marrying her sister. And then he decided, well, I still want this girl that I love. So then he ends up with two wives, one he likes and one he tolerates. But then they get in like a battle between these sisters over who's going to have the most kids. And one of them is like unable to have kids, Rachel. Rachel's not able to have kids, so she's like, well, here, Jacob, take my maid as your wife, and then her kids count as my kids so that I can be competing with my sister still. And then Leah, her sister's like, well, okay, if she's going to play that game, here, Jacob, take my maid. Now he has 4 wives, ends up with 12 kids, and Rachel finally has a son, and her son is Joseph. Yeah. Like, what a messed up family dynamic. That's like even hard to keep track of. But what makes things really messy is that Joseph played favorites with his own kids. So Joseph loved Jacob more than all the rest. Now, and as well, it said Israel in the actual text. It's important to note, Israel is what God renames Jacob. So if you see Jacob, if you see Israel, both of them can be they can be synonyms. And they can both mean either the guy, Jacob, or the whole nation of Israel. So they can both be used interchangeably. You'll see that especially in the prophets. But not only does he have in his mind one of his kids as his favorite, and maybe there's good reasons. Maybe he is a better guy. I don't know. But not only does he have in his mind that he's got a favorite, he acts it out. And he gives Joseph a Technicolor dream coat. At least that's how we say it today. It was a tunic. It was basically the inner garment. Like if you wear an undershirt underneath a dress or a dress shirt or something like that. And it was normally just a plain, ordinary garment. But Joseph's was not. It was a kitchenette pasim. It was a fancy jacket. That'd be my preferred translation, fancy jacket. I like that. But what we see is that throughout Scripture, God builds these kitchenettes, these jackets, these tunics. He builds one for Adam and Eve after they sin in the garden. He talks about the priests and ministering in the tabernacle having a kitchenette, a tunic, a special tunic they would wear. The daughters of the king in 1 Samuel wore fancy jackets, kitchenette pasim, the same exact phrase of what Joseph has here in Genesis 37. And his brothers hate that he's got this constant symbol of his father's favoritism. Isn't it interesting, though? Instead of experience the pain of rejection from their dad, instead of dealing with their hurt over his actions, where do they place their anger? Where do they place their hate? On Joseph, the object of their father's love. Shouldn't they hate their dad for doing this? That's not how we work. Hate makes us immune to our own hurt. Instead of experiencing their hurt, it's way more pleasant to just hate their brother. How are we misdirecting our anger, our hurt, our frustration to the wrong people and things? What's keeping us from taking some time to sit and deal with the hurts that maybe our families have given us. Because it's going to be true. We will experience hurt at the hands of those closest to us, whether it's a spouse, whether it's parents, whether it's children, even a church can cause hurt. But we are called to respond differently. Romans chapter 12, it says this, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves. Leave it to the Lord. He'll work it out. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord." No, it says, rather, if your enemy's hungry, give him food. If they're thirsty, give them water. And it says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Work through the hurt. There's another way that hate makes us immune, and we see this in the life of Joseph and his brothers. Verses 5 through 8 of Genesis 37 says this, "Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more." And this was the dream. He said, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and check it out. My sheaf arose and stood upright, and yours, well, they gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf." Isn't that cool, guys? Well, his brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Not only does this happen once, and Joseph doesn't get the hint that his brothers don't like his dream, he's got another dream from God, and he's like, "Hey guys, check it out. I had a dream, and the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." Isn't that crazy? Well, Joseph was excited because he had this vision from God. He's like, he knew that God had given him this vision, and he wanted to share it with those closest to him. But it didn't go over so well, as maybe you can imagine. His brothers, it says in verse 11, actually became jealous of him. They envied him. And we hear they hated him all the more. Why did they hate him for having a vision for his life? Well, maybe they wanted a dream too. Maybe they wanted a vision. Maybe they wanted a hope for some glory and greatness. But instead of looking at their lives and maybe how they could stop doing all those things, giving them a bad reputation, maybe how they could stop being cruel people, maybe how they could give up the hate in their own heart and buy into the dream that God has for them too. Instead of all that, it was easier for them to hate their brother who had a dream, who had a vision, who was trying to go places in his life. We got to be careful because sometimes the closest we'll get to success is criticizing others. We can become armchair quarterbacks. I could have got the Brewers through those games. If only I was the coach. If only I was the QB. If only I was the boss. If only I was in charge. Look at the mess these people are making. Meanwhile, we don't see the hours and the preparation. We don't have the conversations that they're... It's not our right to judge them and criticize them just because they're out there trying to do something. Sure, the internet gives us the opportunity to say whatever we want about whatever we want. But how is hatred for others actually covering up our own insecurities or inaction? How's it hiding our hope for a dream? You know, it gets worse. This hatred takes root in Joseph's brothers' lives. And in Genesis 37, verses 19 and 20, Joseph's coming out to find his brothers who are still doing the shepherding thing, and he's coming, and they see him from a distance coming over the hills. And they said to one another, verse 19 and 20, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let's kill him. Throw him into one of the pits. Then we'll say that a fierce animal has come and devoured him, and we'll see what becomes of his dreams." That's pretty dark. That's pretty twisted, but that's where hate leads. Hate leads to destruction of the hated. Let's just get rid of him, and then my hate will be gone. But will it? Or will it grow even more? Well, they don't kill him right away. They throw him into a pit, and I can imagine, I have 3 brothers myself, I can imagine how that scene went. Joseph calling up, okay, guys, it's not funny anymore. Please, let me out. Let's go. And they're yelling down at him and all this stuff. But they're serious. They're actually contemplating killing him. Verse 25 of Genesis 37, they actually sit down to eat. Joseph's still down in the hole, unable to get out, trapped. They're like, let's just have a meal while this guy yells at us. Yeah, that's satisfying. And looking up, it says, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum. They're going to go make some trades in Egypt. And Judah, he said to his brothers, hey, what profit is it if we kill the kid? And we're not going to get anything from his life. We're going to have to conceal his blood. We're going to have to live with a lie. Let's not do that. Come, let's sell him. Let's sell him to these traders. So that's what they do. And it says they sold him for 20 shekels of silver. Does anyone know what a shekel is? I've never had a shekel on me, but I looked it up. It's 11 grams of 11 grams of silver, which, do the math, times 20. It's like $500. They sold their brother for $500. So that each of them could have $50 in their pocket to go home with. What? Hate makes us immune to a lot. We know what this does to Joseph. He goes off to slavery. But what kind of pain does this work? What kind of havoc does this wreak in the hearts of his brothers? Because Joseph, although he goes off to slavery, he doesn't go off to hate. Joseph chooses a different way. He chooses forgiveness, because forgiveness makes us immune to hate. 12 years. That's how long Joseph spends as a slave and then as a prisoner. 12 years. He was only 17 to begin with, so almost like half of his life up to this point. He gets to be 29 years old. 12 years of that spent not in college and grad school getting a degree. No, spent in slavery and prison. He didn't deserve the slavery. He didn't deserve the imprisonment, but here he is. And he was never a slave to hate. He was never a slave to hate. How do we know that? Well, we don't get let in on his emotional journey or his thought life, but what we do know is this. After 12 years, he finally gets a chance to come before the king of Egypt because the king has a couple dreams. Sound familiar? He's got a couple dreams, and no one can tell him what's going on. And then there's a guy who remembered, well, Joseph, he talked about a dream to me. And so they bring Joseph up, and after 12 years, he could be completely embittered by hate and not be ready, but here he is, ready for this moment, and he comes, he interprets the dream for the king. He gives him a plan. He's like, hey, the dream actually says there's going to be 7 years of abundance. Like, you're going to have more than you can ever want. And then there's going to be 7 years of nothing. And what you're going to need to do here then, God gave you the dream twice. It means it's going to be sure. You're going to want to stockpile as much as you can in the 7 good years and then have it to deal out for the 7 years of famine. So you're going to want to get some wise people around you and do that. And the king, he sees this man composed. He sees this man smart. And what does he say in Genesis 41? This is what he said about Joseph. Can we find a man like this? In whom is the Spirit of God? Have you met someone full of hate and thought that? No. Joseph was full of love and forgiveness for his brothers, and it seems like his dream is coming true. Remember the sheaf, the bundle of wheat, standing upright, all bowing down to him. He's second in command over a whole country. It's pretty impressive. And God is working through all of this on his brothers too. Joseph's down there dealing out grain in Egypt, and the famine hits his family up in the land of Canaan as well. They're like, well, there's grain in Egypt, so they go down to Egypt, and there's Joseph. They don't recognize him, but Joseph recognizes his brothers, and he decides to play a trick on them. Now, the trick, you'll have to read it for yourself and judge for yourself. Maybe he's trying to be a little vengeful. Maybe he's trying to work out his own will. But I believe what's going on is Joseph is trying to see if they're still given to hate or if their hearts have changed. So they come down and they buy some grain, and Joseph puts their money back in their bag, and then he makes it look like that one of them stole his cup. And then he takes one of the brothers hostage. He said, when you come back, I'll give you your brother back, but you got to bring your youngest brother with you. And they're like, we don't want to bring our youngest brother. Like, our dad, he needs him. This is Joseph's full brother, Benjamin. And so finally they run out of food, and they're like, we got to go back. And Judah's like, I promise, I'll take care of the kid. We just need to go get grain. They go down, and then Joseph puts his cup in the bag of Benjamin. He's like, this kid, he's mine now. He's going to be with me. He broke the law. He's a slave to Pharaoh. And all of this to test his brother, Genesis 44, this is what Judah, the one who was ready to sell his brother into slavery, this is what Judah says now. Oh, my Lord. Maybe he's even bowing down. Oh, my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant. I said to my father, if I do not bring my brother back to you, then I shall bear the blame before you all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain. Let me remain instead of the boy, and I will be a servant to you. I'll bow down to you. And let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to the father of this if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. And do you hear what is in Judah's response? A love for his brother. Willing to take responsibility for his own faults and his own failures. Willing to deal with the hurt of his father and actually love his father in the midst of it. Willing to submit to a life of slavery himself. And this is the very moment. Joseph doesn't need to hear any more. After Judah says this, he reveals that he is, in fact, Joseph, their brother. Hate had become a prison, and Joseph wanted to set his brothers free as well, because he had truly forgiven his brothers. And I believe that the pinnacle of Joseph's dream is not when his brothers come and bow down before him for grain, but in Genesis 50, after his father dies, they come to him and say, hey, Dad said you need to forgive us. Please forgive us. And Joseph says, come on, guys, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? No. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. He spoke forgiveness over them. To be immune to hatred is to forgive. Forgiveness makes us immune to hate. And Joseph, he pointed his family to forgiveness. He pointed his family to love. And he points all of us to love incarnate, to Jesus, who was betrayed by a disciple for 20 pieces of silver, who was thrown into jail unjustly, who was made to suffer the cross. And interestingly enough, in John 19, they take his ketone. It says the soldiers had crucified him, they nailed him to the cross, they stripped him naked, and they took his clothes and they divided them, one part for each soldier, and they also took his tunic, his ketone. But it was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom, so they didn't rip it up. Covered in his blood, they took it away. In Luke 23, what does Jesus say from the cross? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Jesus spoke forgiveness. Even in the face of those people who were mocking him, who were challenging his dream, who were saying, oh, this dream of salvation from this man trying to save, no, it's nothing, because look at him now. Let's see what comes of his dreams when we kill him. Jesus came to bring forgiveness through his life, through his death, through his resurrection. He's made the word of forgiveness fixed forever. Even as we go through the land of our own fathers' sojournings, this land of hate and pain and hurt and longing, we embrace the way of Jesus. We embrace the way of love and forgiveness. We embrace Proverbs chapter 10, which says, hate stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. We cover all offenses. And let's be honest, some of us have been trapped in hate for way too long, maybe even longer than 12 years. And I think God is challenging us today. Are we going to give it up? Do we want to remain stuck? Or do we want to be set free by the power of love, by the power of forgiveness, by the blood of Jesus shed for you and for me? Let your brother Jesus set you free. Amen.